we're going to start off by going through the process of working with a buyer. So when you get a buyer, there's usually multiple ways that we receive a buyer, right? One being it's a referral from a friend or a family member, which is quite common, especially with buyers. And then the other being obviously a lead generation method, whether it's online or cold calling, door knocking, networking, whatever that might look like. So your first step when you're working with a buyer, if it is a referral, is always to reach out to the person who gave you the referral and thank them. And thank them properly, not just, a call and a, hey, thanks for that referral. Send them a nice handwritten card, send them a gift card to Morton's or Starbucks or whatever, because they're supporting your business, and it's also going to help them to continue to support your business as you go forward. So don't forget that you need to have that relationship with them, and you need to be appreciative of the fact that they are referring you people. So I'm in the resources folder right now in Google Drive, as you guys can see. And in this section under working with buyers, there's all sorts of different content for actually working with a buyer client. So under this checklist, sorry, let me just move you guys real quick. Why isn't it working? Anyway, under the checklist and buyer tools folder, you're going to see that there's a bunch of different checklists. There's a moving checklist, there's some household budgets, there's a house tour checklist, there's the cost of purchasing a home. But the main one I want you guys to look at is the buyer experience agent checklist, okay? This is your guideline for all of your actions that you need to take when you're working with a buyer. So every time you get a buyer client, you could have this checklist and you could go through it step by step if you wanted to. This is my version of what I do when I'm working with buyers. So keep in mind that you can change this. You can edit it. You can make it whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be exactly what I do. This is just an example of an entire buyer process, because what happens with most clients or with most agents is that, you get a call, you get a buyer, and you just go out and you start showing them houses. You make a phone call and you get some information, and then you start showing houses. And you don't do any of the work at the front end that's going to set up the process, that's going to set expectations, that's going to get you to move ahead faster, get the client to buy faster, and also validate the client's seriousness and commitment to you as an agent. Because a lot of agents, the minute we think that we have a client or a lead, we drop everything and we start running in circles to try and get that lead to turn into money or a deal, and we don't actually validate the client, and it goes nowhere, which happens more often than not because we don't follow these steps first, right? So just keep that in mind as we're going through it. This can be edited, but this is a system that I've always followed, and it's always worked extremely well for me, and we'll go through it step by step. So what you're going to see on the buyer experience is the very first thing, like I just said, is thank the person who referred the client. And it says see script because in the scripts folder in the resources, there's a script for this. So you can just refer to that and find this script. Now, this checklist comes from when I had a team. So you're going to see some stuff that says send the client care coordinator info. That obviously isn't going to apply if you don't have an assistant. So that's just you. So what that means is just make sure that the client is getting put into your database immediately. So the minute the person who referred them gives you their phone number, their email, and all that information, they should go into your database. And then you're going to set an appointment with them. So you're going to book the date of consultation. So your first step is going to be to call the lead and obviously introduce yourself, and hopefully the person who has referred them has done some of the legwork and let them know that you're going to be reaching out. And then you're going to call them, introduce yourself, and set up a time to meet with them in person, okay? Don't do it over the phone. I mean, obviously right now we have to with COVID, so we're going to have to make an allowance for that. But the reality is, in a normal market, you want to have these meetings in person. They're way more effective, they're way more professional, and you build more rapport and a stronger relationship with the person when you meet them in person. So it's actually a vital part of the process. You want to get them to like you and trust you. And then you also want to meet them and verify what's their character like, what vibe are you getting from them, what information are they bringing, do they show up to the appointment, do they cancel on you last minute, what are we looking at here, right? So the day before the appointment, so you might set your appointment, and remember we've talked about schedules in the past, and we know that, we're not booking an appointment on the same day as the phone call that we call to introduce ourselves. That's not how that works, because you won't have time to prepare for your appointment if you do that. So you want to make sure that you're booking your appointment for 48 hours or a couple of days or even potentially a week out. You don't need it to be as long as a week. I don't recommend it being a full week, just in case, they get in touch with somebody else or whatever happens. You don't want to create too much of a window of opportunity there. However, that being said, it doesn't need to be 24-hour turnaround. 48, 72 hours is probably fine. Even 4 days or 5 days is probably okay, but that's about the most you'd want to do. But that allows you to fit them into your schedule. So remember, on our sample schedules, we talk about having appointment slots. You would be fitting them into one of your appointment slots, right? The day before the consultation, you're going to call them to confirm that they're still good for the appointment. And you're also going to qualify them at this point. So if we take a look at buyer scripts, there's a couple of different qualification scripts. So I'm just going to go back out here for a second and go into the buyer script folder. And you're going to see in here, these are all the scripts we have just specifically for buyers. There's the buyer script from Mike Ferry. These are all of the Keller Williams University scripts working with buyers #1, and then a lead generation script for buyers as well. We have Mike Ferry buyer objection handlers, and then this qualification script, as well as all of the Ignite scripts for buyers here. So this is the script that I like to use when I'm qualifying my clients. And the reason for that is because it covers all the main questions that we ask, and it's pretty straightforward. When most people read this script, it's kind of overwhelming because it's just this list of questions that are getting asked, right? And it can be a bit kind of strange, but you got to remember, when you're on the phone, you're not firing question after question after question off directly. You're asking them and having conversation. I don't ask all of these questions because some of these questions I actually ask on my consultation. One sec, I'm just checking the chat. Yeah, Najim, I'm qualifying them over the phone before I meet with them in person. Just a couple of things. So easier if you can unmute and ask, to be honest, but yeah, usually I would qualify them first. But like I said, and what I was going to get to is that I'm not going to ask all of these questions. I am going to ask some, though, because there are certain things I want to know before I go and meet with them. So for example, I don't really ask about the areas of interest, but I do ask, for example, how long have you been looking for a home? So the way I would phrase that would be, before we meet tomorrow, I just have some questions I'd like to ask you so I can get fully prepared and make sure that I bring all of the right information that's going to help you with this process. So can I ask you, what have you done so far? What have you done? Have you been looking at homes online? Have you gotten any open houses? Obviously, again, this is applying to a different market. And just in general, where are you in the process, right? So they're going to answer that no problem. They're going to say, oh, we've been on realtor.ca. We went to a couple of open houses in the neighborhood, but we didn't really like going to the open houses, and that's all we've really done. Sometimes they'll say we haven't done anything, and sometimes they'll say, yeah, we've been looking for a while, but we weren't ready to do anything, and now we're ready to talk to an agent, right? The reason that we want to ask that question is we want to get a feel for what's going on in their world. Where are they at in the process? How long have they been actively kind of thinking about buying a home? Because the longer, the better. And then the next question that I'm always going to ask, and I'm going to jump to, is number 7. Are you working with any other real estate agents, right? The reason for that being, if they're under contract with somebody else, we can't meet with them. We can't talk to them about this. Now, if they say, oh, we were working with somebody, but our contract expired, that's fine, as long as we can validate that the contract is expired. And if they say, well, we were working with somebody, but we don't really like them and we prefer to work with you, and that's why, Jen referred me to you, then you could say to them, do you have an active contract signed? And if so, before we can go any further, you're going to have to get a cancellation of that agreement, right? And then that will remove them from the previous contract and allow you then to have your consultation and move forward. So again, like I said, I'm not actively asking all of these questions, but I am asking some of them. How long have you been looking for a home? How soon would you like to move? Get an idea of their timeline. The reason we want an idea of their timeline up front is because sometimes people will say, well, maybe a year or two. And if that's the case, again, we probably don't want to go on this appointment right now because they're too far out. So what we can do then is shift our conversation and direct them in a way that's going to make more sense for them for right now for what they need. I don't ask about the home at all. I will ask, do you need to sell an existing home to buy the next one? Reason for that being that A, I want to know if it's a listing and a buy, but B, I also need to know what the conversation is going to look like the next day. So if they have a home they need to sell, then I need to know that so that I can have that conversation with them properly also. I don't usually say what price range are you considering, but I will ask, have you spoken to a lender and have you gotten pre-qualified? If they haven't spoken to a lender and they haven't gotten pre-qualified, I'll still meet with them the next day. However, obviously at that point, the conversation is going to be a little bit different because my guidance at the very beginning is going to be before we can move forward, your first step is to speak with a lender and get pre-qualified, right? And the reason for that being that I can't show them homes if I don't know what they can afford to buy. And I'm not going to show them homes that they say, oh, we're probably good for 700. And then you show them homes around 657. And then they come back and say, actually, we got qualified for 500 because they're just going to be disappointed with everything they see. And then on the flip side to that, I don't want to spend a bunch of time showing them homes and then they come back and they're like, oh, actually, we can spend $1 million and we want to now start looking at something completely different because it's not a good control of my time. So I want to make sure that they have, in fact, spoken to a lender. The down payment question I wouldn't ask either. Are there any other people that need to see the home before you make a decision to buy is a great question to ask when you're pre-qualifying because it allows you to know, are there parents involved? Is there a spouse involved? Is there another person who's going to show up at the last minute and have an opinion different to everybody else? Because trust me, that happens and it's going to throw your entire deal off track. So making sure at the very beginning, are there other people involved in that transaction who are going to need to see the home? If they say yes, then you're going to ask that they be at the consultation as well so that everybody's on the same page and everybody's getting the same information. The rest of these questions I don't generally ask at the beginning. I ask them on the consultation, but those are the main ones when I make that pre-qualification call in order to confirm my appointment for the next day. Those are the ones I need to know in advance because A, I need to know, do I really want to go on this appointment? Is it worth it? Is it worth my time? Is it a real appointment? Are they qualified? Where are we at in the process? And what am I actually walking into? Is it more than one deal or is it just a buy deal? Are they a first-time buyer? Are they an investor? Are they working with other realtors? What are those factors? And those are things I need to know before I meet with somebody because a lot of those answers, depending on how they go, might mean that I'm not actually going on that appointment. So that's why we pre-qualify always before we go on our consultation, okay? I saw someone message in the chat, so I'm just going to check that really quickly. Oh, hey, Andrew. If they said they don't want to work with the other agent, then it'd be okay to ask them. Yeah, absolutely. If they tell you that they're under a contract with the other agent, but they aren't happy with that agent and they don't want to work with them anymore and they ask for your advice on what to do, you can actually absolutely tell them that they have the option to cancel that contract. So keep in mind, most buyer agents aren't going to tell the person that even if they know they're not happy, and they'll try and hold them to their contract. So, but they have every right to request to cancel a contract and move forward. And we can absolutely advise them that that's their option. We can't tell them go do it, but we can say, the way I would approach it is I would say, you know what, if you're not happy in the situation and you want external help and you want to talk to somebody else, that's not a problem. There's a couple of different things you can do here. Your first option, it would be to wait out your contract. How long is left on your contract? If it's only a week or something, then maybe we just wait it out and we meet next week, right? If it's 2 months, then obviously that's a bit long. So another option you have is that you could ask that listing agent or that buyer agent to cancel the contract. And request that they no longer represent you. And there's a cancellation form for that is in web forms, just in case you guys ever need to know, or an AuthentiSign that everybody can sign. And then the third option is obviously wait out the longer contract. But that's probably not going to be in their best interest, or they can try and continue to work with the other agent, I guess. But we're obviously going to recommend that they cancel that contract at that point. Yeah, and we can say that for sure. We're not advising them necessarily to do it. We're just giving them their options.
Hey, Jen, I have a question. It's Nathan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a mom that I knew, and she came up to me and said that, oh, my daughter is looking for a home. And I knew the daughter, so I asked her a bunch of questions. What are you looking for? Are you working with anyone? And at that time, she said, no, she's not working with anyone. And then she would want me to come to her house to talk more about the buying process.
Right.
So I asked them, are you pre-qualified? They're like, yeah, no problem. Anyways, I went to the house, and basically everything she said was a lie. And
wow.
She said, I'm not pre-qualified. Oh, and I'm talking to these other agents as well. And then I'm like, okay, so are you in a contract? And she's like, no, I'm not. So anyways, we go through the whole list of questions, like, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
It was her and her husband at that time. And I got all my answers. And at the end, I was like, are you ready? Like, she's like, yeah, I'm ready to look. I was like, okay, first step, we have to get you pre-qualified. She's like, yeah, for sure. And I gave her like a couple people to talk to. And at the end, when I'm trying to get her to sign the buyer representation, she tells me she doesn't want to sign it because she doesn't want to involve, or she doesn't want to, what did she say exactly? She's like, a friendship relationship and a business relationship. She wants to keep that separate. I'm like, but I'm trying to help you. She's like, and I have my boss, he's a real estate agent, and I have my friend who's a real estate agent. And then she just left it at that. So how would you try working something around that, and how would you really get someone to sign a buyer rep?
Yeah, so good question. Usually at the end of the consultation, which is kind of the next step of this process, I would ask them to sign the buyer representation at that point. The thing about that situation is that there's just so many red flags, right? Yeah. The fact that you get given false information and then you get there and none of that information is accurate already to me in my brain. As an agent, I would be going like, I don't think I want to work with this person because I wouldn't trust them, right? And how do I go in and represent them in an offer situation and negotiate on their behalf when I don't know if what they're telling me is true, and then I'm going to have to validate everything they tell me, and then are they going to be willing to give me that information? So for example, when you got told they were pre-qualified and then you show up and then they're not pre-qualified, you know, what happens when they go and talk to a lender? Are they going to give you the right information? Are they going to tell you what their actual amount is? Are they going to tell you if there's any issues in regard to that? And then if you ask for information to validate, such as the lender's contact information or a letter of pre-approval to kind of confirm everything, are they going to be willing to share it with you? And if they're not, then there's a concern there. Why wouldn't they be willing to share that, right? So I would arguably say in that situation, you know, the whole argument of business relationship, friendship relationship has nothing to do with signing a BRA. A BRA is there to protect everybody, right? The agent, the buyer. Yeah, and it's all about, you know, loyalty and committing to each other and trusting each other. So I would probably have said in that instance when she started saying, well, I have a boss and a brother and that, at that point I probably would have just walked away from the opportunity altogether and said, you know what, obviously you're well taken care of, and you know that this is how I run my business. If you're not comfortable with that, that's no problem. I don't want it to be an issue in our relationship, and good luck with it, right? Sometimes we have to make those calls, right? Go with your gut on that. When you have that many red flags, there's a lot more reasons not to want to do that than to want to do it, right? And it just sounds kind of shady.
It was more out of like respect from the mom, because I knew her mom and she was the daughter to me, and we're living together right now. And the mom was actually in the meeting. She's like, just sign the agreement. She's like, no, I don't want to sign it. Her mom was like telling her to sign it, and then she was just giving all these like, excuses for no reason.
Happens. Yeah, it happens. And obviously, you know, you can come at from two perspectives. You could look at it and go, you know what, a lot of people don't like to sign a BRA, and that's okay, you know. And if she had have been upfront about everything else and then at the end just said, you know what, I'm really just not comfortable signing this contract right now, I probably would have been okay with that, because you can get the BRA signed, you know, a couple of steps down the road, or some agents don't even get it signed until they're actually preparing an offer, right? That being said, because she misled you and the mom about all that other information, that's what would concern me, is that she's not telling the truth, right? So how trustworthy is she going to be as a client, and how confident are you going to feel representing her? So that would be the red flag for me more than anything else. I wouldn't choose to spend my time focused on chasing that client. I would go and spend my time finding clients that I actually trust and want to work with personally.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just give me 1 sec. I'm just going to check. I think someone's messaging me. Sorry, I'm just looking at our coaching chat. Did Amir get in? What's going on there? Who's chatting? No. Okay. Give me 1 sec. Let me try and...
Hey, Jen, I know it was hard. I had to try 3 or 4 times to get in, so there's some weird stuff happening, but I just told them to keep trying.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, it should just log in, but maybe they're having glitches, or I know they've been having some trouble, right, with the system. So he can just keep trying. We're also recording it, so worst case scenario, he can watch it back later. So, all right, let's keep moving on. Let's try to let him figure that out. So once you've gone through the pre-qualification process and you've asked those kind of few questions that we need to know, and we're still going ahead with the consultation, then the next step is to prepare for the consultation, right? So the consultation itself, I don't look at it, like a lot of people get nervous around it, and I don't know if it's because they consider it like a presentation, or that you're trying to sell yourself, or what that word is. I like to use the phrase conversation personally, because the whole point of the consultation or the conversation is just to get to know what the client is looking for, and explain the services that you provide, right? And how you're going to help them, and what that process is going to look like for them. That's your job, is really just to make sure that they understand what that system is, and then to ask questions and let them answer those questions as you go. So, you know, keep in mind that when it comes to working with buyers, they're the ones leading the charge. They're the ones picking the house. They're the ones, it's their money, it's their investment. It's our job to guide them, to make sure that they're buying properties that are good investments, that we're protecting them in regard to educating them on what is a smart decision and what might not be such a smart decision, and making sure that they're aware of all of their options and what that process looks like. That's our job for working with buyers, right? And obviously then to navigate the contracts and get the deal done at the end of the day. So don't think of it as a situation where you're trying to go in and sell yourself to them. Think of it as a situation where you're going to go in and figure out what it is that they need from you, and then give them a solution that they can follow, that's easy and clear, and that makes them feel confident in the process. And if you can do that, they're going to feel confident in you, they're going to trust you, and they're most likely going to hire you. The good news about buyers is that they are easier to convert than sellers, which I'm sure most of you remember from when we did our business plan conversations. They have a higher conversion rate. The reason for that being that buyers don't generally interview as many agents as sellers do. So if they're referred to you, for example, there's a good chance that that's your deal, unless you do something really wrong and mess it up along the way somehow, or you just really aren't a fit for each other personality-wise, which also happens sometimes. Because you got to remember, we all have different personality types. We all approach our business in certain ways. And sometimes you just don't mesh with somebody, right? And I mean, I can't tell you the amount of deals that I've done in my career where I really just didn't enjoy working with the person. And it wasn't anything that they did. It wasn't anything that I did. It's just that personality wise, we were very different and it was very difficult to navigate. It doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you have to understand how to operate with the different personalities in order to make it a little bit more cohesive and make it a little bit smoother process for everybody. And you got to keep in mind that they have to come first, right? They're the ones that are buying the house. They're the ones spending the money. So they have to feel good about the process. And sometimes we have to do things a little differently than we would normally do to make them feel good or feel heard. Part of the consultation as well, what a lot of agents do is they go in and they just talk about themselves the whole time, how many deals they've done, what makes them so great, why you should hire them, why they're the best agent for the job. And they don't actually ask the client any questions about what the client needs or wants. And for certain personalities, that's going to work, absolutely. But for majority of personalities, it's not. And the reason for that is because most people aren't going to want a buyer agent who is all about themselves. They want a buyer agent who's there to take care of the client. And that's our job. So that's a big part, and the reason I'm getting into all of that is because that's a big part of the consultation, is setting up the stage of that being the relationship that it is about them. So when you're on a consultation, you need to be talking probably with buyers. You're going to talk a little bit more because you've got to explain the process to them and how it works and the step-by-step of it and all the paperwork and all that stuff. However, you're still probably talking 60% of the time and they're talking 40% of the time. Okay, that's kind of the goal that you're going to aim towards. If you're talking 80% of the time or 90% of the time, you are talking too much and you need to stop. So when we talk about working on scripts and we talk about working on presentations, a consultation is just that, right? It's learning what a consultation needs to look like and what the process is. So if you see in the resources folder, this file here, a copy of Buyer Consultation, this is an outline of my consultation. This is what I did with every single client. And I've actually tweaked this over the years and I haven't fully edited it yet. But this is a lead conversion conversation. So this is kind of tips on what you can say and how to get the information you need from them in order to get them to commit to working with you before you leave the consultation. I have a newer one written out that it obviously isn't in here. I don't know why, but we can go through this one. So what you're going to see is the purpose of the initial consultation is to build rapport with your prospect and to get them on the conveyor belt, which is the system or process of buying a home. No one wakes up in a new home. They go through the process of thinking about buying a home first, right? So that's where online leads come in. When people start thinking about buying a home, generally they go online to search for the properties first. And that's how they end up on our websites, or they click on our Facebook lead ads or whatever that looks like, and they go into our database. So when we talk about online leads and conversion being a lot lower or taking a lot longer, that's exactly why that happens. It's because they're only at the very first stage of even thinking about buying a home when they register or sign up for more information. So we have a longer conversion belt going on to get them from that phase to actually being an active buyer. So if you're ever wondering why those rates are as low as they are, that's exactly why. The next step is that they start to go into action by gathering basic information. They want to do this as anonymous as possible, right? So maybe they'll sign up for a free PDF or things of that nature, but they're not going to give you a lot of their contact information, and they're not really probably going to be willing to disclose that much information. And then you want to move them forward through the process, and the next step is obviously to sit down with them and have your consultation. Now, people always ask me, and this is one of the first questions that always comes up, is where do you do the consultation? Here's my recommendation. I do them at coffee shops mainly, or at the office, okay? And the reason for that, people always say, well, why don't you just go to their home and meet them there? And the reason I actually never do that is because there's just way too many distractions. If they have kids, if they're, they're in their comfort zone, they're maybe too relaxed, they're maybe not as focused on the conversation, they might be distracted by their roommates or something else in the home. And it's just better to get them out of that space And it's easier to kind of conduct it more professionally when we're not sitting in their living room or sitting at their kitchen table, right? So I much prefer that. My go-to is always a coffee shop. I would meet them at Starbucks, or I'd meet them at Tim Hortons, or Second Cup, whatever they chose. I always gave them the option of which one they preferred. And then I would pick the actual location. So I would always ask them when they were committing to the consultation, I would say, let's grab a cup of coffee and meet for about 45 minutes, and we can set up, we can go through and talk about the process. I can educate you on what's happening in the current market, and also give you an idea of how I can help you find the perfect home and set you up with my team to make sure that it's as stress-free and hassle-free as possible. That was my closing script for getting an appointment booked, and it worked because that was everything that they wanted, right? So on that note, then I would follow it up by saying, so, what kind of coffee do you prefer? Are you a Starbucks person? You like Timmy's? You want to do Second Cup? What does that look like? And most people would say Starbucks. Some would say Tim Hortons. It was an occasional Second Cup, but not that many. And then once they told me that, I would say, perfect. I'm going to look up the closest one, but for the two of us, and I'm going to text you with the location. Is Tuesday at 3 o'clock good for you, right? Or would Thursday at 4 be better? So that closing script again gets tacked back on. So the reason that I would do that is because I want to pick the one that makes the most sense for me for my schedule. But I also want to make sure it's not too far away for them. So if I know I'm coming from the office in Aurora and they live up at, Woodland Hills, then I'm going to probably just go up Yonge Street and pick one of the Starbucks on Yonge Street somewhere there. If I know that they're coming south from Richmond Hill and I'm in Aurora, maybe I'm going to pick the one on Bayview or on Bloomington or whatever, on Bathurst, whatever makes the most sense, right? So I'm still controlling my time management by making that decision. And then I just text them the address and a verification of the time of the appointment. Meet me at, 1235 Bathurst Street. There's Starbucks there. It's right beside the Scotiabank. I'll see you there on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, right? Very, very simple. And then on Monday, I'm going to call them and do that qualification script. Okay, so that's how you set up a consultation. And then when you get to the consultation, there's a couple of different processes that we go through. Now, this first section here, the number 1, I don't do this. I actually never really did. I don't like it very much, but a lot of people use this as a script. So I have it in there, but I've never personally used it. What I've always done, and that's why I was saying I have edited this, but I have to just, upload the new version. What I would usually do when we first get there is we sit down and I let them know that the consultation is going to take about 45 minutes, maybe an hour if we have some questions. And over the course of that time, we're going to discuss, what's happening in the market, what the buyer process looks like today, how to navigate it safely, and, what the next steps are going to be moving forward for us as we work together. So I'm already just starting to use the language and plant the seed of us working together. And you'll notice that I do that all the time. I'm always going to say, when you hire me, when we're looking at houses, when we put in an offer, when I negotiate for you, when I represent you. It's a tactic. It's called future pacing. And what it does is it creates and plants seeds in people's heads of what's going to happen down the road. And it starts to allow their subconscious to accept it, so that when they're at the point where we're asking them to sign the contract, they already feel comfortable with the process. Because what happens is, our subconscious and our conscious work, they combat each other, right? So if you're doing a consultation or even a listing presentation and you're not already having the conversations around, when we work together, when you hire me, when we write the offer and those sorts of things, you're not allowing the subconscious time to digest and feel good about that statement. And if the subconscious doesn't feel good about it before you ask to sign the contract, they're going to have conflict. And if they have conflict, they might not be willing to sign. But if you're doing that in advance and you're using that language throughout, and they like what they're hearing and everything you're saying, they're like, yep, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. And then you're locking that down with a statement of, when you hire me, you're going to get this. When we work together, I'm going to protect you. When we do that offer, I'm going to do this. By the time you get to signing the paperwork, your subconscious is going, yeah, that feels good, because if I hire you, I get all of these things, and it makes it easier for them to sign the paperwork on the spot. So that's just a little bit of very basic neuro-linguistic programming, but that's how that works. So You always want to work that language into your conversations. And it's just a little trick, but it works very well. So this do nothing, do it yourself. I don't like that. I don't particularly use it. I was taught that when I first started in the industry. I tried it a few times. I never really found it very effective. So I didn't. I had the other conversation, like I mentioned, where I would sit down and I would start the conversation. If they were a referral, I would offer, obviously guys, some of this I hope is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to pay for the coffee, right? Not your clients. You're going to ask them what they want. You're going to explain how long the meeting is going to take. You're going to give them an overview of what you're going to discuss. And then you're going to make a little bit of small talk with them, build a little bit of rapport. So small talk can look like a couple of things. It can be, if it's a referral, it can be like, oh, you know, Jane mentioned that you guys work together. What do you do at the law firm, or how long have you been working there, right? Or if you don't know how they know each other, how do you know Jane, right? It can be as simple as that. It can be something along the lines of talking about the weather. It can be talking about what's going on in the current market. Oh my God, did you see that rates went down again? How amazing is that? Da, 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 da. You can talk about whatever you want depending on your contact and your understanding of the person. But don't spend too long doing that. You just want to do long enough that they start to get a little more comfortable, and you'll be able to tell by their body language, right? When they're first there, they're going to be nervous. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be sitting a little more uptight. They're going to maybe be fidgeting a little bit, you know, maybe like looking at each other and kind of giggling. If it's a couple, that kind of thing happens, right? So our job is to get them to relax a little bit. And the first step is buy them their drink, because then that's generosity, and they're going to like that. They're going to appreciate it, and it's thoughtful. And then the second step is a little bit, like I said, of small talk. You can implement the Ford model here if you want to. For those of you who don't know what the Ford model is, it's things you can talk about with people, going from the most basic of conversations that everyone's really willing to talk to the most deep. So it's family, occupation, recreation, dreams, right? So at the beginning, you might get through family and occupation, and you might maybe not going to get anywhere else. By the time you're done with them, working with them as a client, you should be easily able to talk to them about their dreams and their future plans and why they're doing what they're doing and all that stuff. So once you've gone through all of that, the next step that I go to is section 2 here, the questions to ask. I call this my 4 W's, all right? You can phrase them as 4 whats if you want, or you can phrase them as what, where, when, and why. Doesn't matter. But the reality is that these questions are the questions you ask, and then let them talk. All right? Always let them talk on these, to let them talk as much as they want, and take notes. And have a notebook with you and say to them, you know, is it okay with you if I take some notes? I just want to make sure I'm not missing any information. The first question you're going to ask is, what's the perfect home look like to you? You describe it to me, right? They know what the home they want looks like. They're going to tell you, oh, you know, it's going to be a 2-bedroom condo, brand new, or within the last 5 years. It's going to have 1-car parking. It's going to have tennis courts and this and that as part of the amenities. It's going to be close to work or close to the transit, or it's going to have 2-car parking. It's going to have hardwood floors. It's going to have granite counters. They really get into it, and you can ask them more about it. You know, if you know, for example, if one of them says, oh, it has to have a big kitchen, and they say something open-ended like that, pull at that thread, right? Don't just go, okay, big kitchen, and write it down and move on. Just say to them, you know, why is that important? And then, you know, this is also, again, we're building more rapport. We're building more relationship. Why is that important? Why do you want a big kitchen? Are you a big cook? Do you guys entertain a lot? What does that look like? Yeah, you know what? I love to cook. It's a passion of mine. It's been something I've been doing for years. Oh, that's fantastic. You know, I also love to cook, and that you can just allow their answers to create continual conversation. So keep in mind, you're not just flying through these questions. It's like the qualification script. You're not just hammering them question after question. Each question should open up conversations, and you can dig deeper and get to know their motivation and get to know why they really want to buy and what they're truly looking for in a home, which is going to allow you to then narrow down the amount of homes you have to show them, because you're going to know what they're looking for, right? Next question, what would the perfect location look like? Or where would the home be located, depending on how you want to phrase that, right? So tell me a little bit about the location. Do you have a location, a spot in mind? Is there a particular area you really want to stay in, or are you open to a couple of different pockets? And then let them answer, let them talk, right? You're going to notice a pattern here. Ask a question, let them talk. Add a little rapport, pull at the thread a little bit, get a bit more information, ask a question, let them talk. And this section, these 4 questions, will be majority of your consultation. What's the perfect time frame for you? When do you need to be in the home? Okay. Asking them when they need to be in the home versus when they need to buy the home is actually very powerful. And the reason for that being, when you say when you need to be in the home, that puts them, again, they're thinking forward. So hypothetically, let's use an example where they say, well, we really want to be in the home by July because we have to enroll little Jimmy in school, and he has to be registered by August in order for us to get into the school district we want, right? Which happens in some areas. There are cutoffs. So you have to make sure that if they are particularly looking for an area based on schools, you have to make sure that that you know that, and that you can validate that what that time frame needs to look like. Now, most of the parents especially are already going to know that, so they're going to be able to answer that question. So then you get to work that backwards and go, okay, no problem. So you guys want to be in the house by July. That's perfect. You know, on average, it takes 60 days to close a home, 45 to 60 days. So it's all of July, all of June, which means that we probably need to have a home picked out and an offer accepted by the middle to the end of May in order to meet that timeline. So what that means is that, you know, we've got 6 weeks to find you the perfect home, right? So what I've done there is I've created a bit of urgency in their process. And what that does is it moves them along faster. It gets them to the buy faster, and it motivates them to get moving quicker, right? So the time frame is important for our own knowledge, but it's also important because it allows us to create a backwards time frame for them and help them realize that they might think July is 5 months from now, not a big deal. We got tons of time. We got 4 months to buy a house. Well, that's not true, right? And you need to be able to explain that to them. And then the next question that is, what's the perfect price? So I go back and forth on this question. I will never say what's the perfect price, but I'll say, you know, do you guys have a budget in mind? I know that you mentioned that you hadn't spoken to a lender yet, and we'll talk about that in a second, but, you know, do you have an idea of maybe what you might think you could spend, or have you looked at your monthly cash flow? Do you know what you're comfortable spending? And then they'll answer that question. And the reason that we ask this question, though, is so that we can understand, okay, if they tell me that they want to buy a 2-bedroom brand new condo at Young and Shepherd, but then they tell me that their budget is realistically $250,000-300,000, I automatically have to now have a conversation with them to explain that their budget and the location of the home they want aren't going to be in alignment with each other. And are they open to any other areas? Because if not, we're not going to find them something, right? And it is our job to be upfront and be honest about that. So that opens up then a whole nother conversation that you might need to have. So as agents, part of our job is to understand how all of this works and know our neighborhoods and know our price points, know our market, which is why we're supposed to preview homes and learn the markets, right? And do practice CMAs and all of those things so we can have these conversations professionally and educate people properly on what that needs to look like. And this conversation, this part of the conversation will last a long time because you're basically going to ask them questions. Like I said, they're going to answer, you're going to educate them a little bit, or you're going to build more rapport with them. By the time they're done with this conversation, though, it should be very clear to you what they want to buy, where they want to buy it, when they need to close on it, and what they're able to spend. And so you can then gauge, do we have any disconnects? Does everything seem like if it's a good fit? If it does, we can move forward. And if it doesn't, we need to have that conversation right now. The next step for me after this, and it's not actually on this list, but it is on the new one I updated, is to then educate them a little bit on the market. Here's what's happening right now. Here's what we're seeing, especially if we're in a multiples market, because a lot of buyers truly don't understand what that means. And if you don't explain the process to them, it's going to take you 3 or 4 or 5 offers before they win a property. If you explain the process to them, it's still going to take you 2 or 3, but it's 2 or 3 versus 5, right? Because they're going to go into it with their eyes open, and they're going to understand that, you know, what offer dates are, why people are holding back, what that means in regard to the list price, why the list price is lower below market value, and why that doesn't mean that they're going to pay that much money for it, that they might have to pay 100,000 more, and why we might have to waive conditions, and what that looks like and what that can mean for them. You need to be able to educate them on all of that. And the more you can do all of that up front, the more they're going to trust you and like you and work with you, right? And then the final step after the consultation is to wrap up. So wrapping up is a combination of a couple of things. So what I do, my next step is what I call an orientation tour. Okay, so not everyone does this, and you don't have to do it. You could just move right to signing a buyer representation agreement and then setting them up on Collaborate and Stratus, and then showing them homes. That's fine if you want to do it that way. The orientation tour is something I've always done because I focus so much on educating them and making sure they understand the market that it's actually a big element of my consultation, or the next step of it. So I explain to them exactly what a consultation tour is. And a consultation tour is this is kind of what I say, you know, the next step is for us to set up a time to go out on a consultation tour so that I can educate you on what's happening in the market, and we can go and see some homes to get a better idea of exactly, you know, what you like, what you don't like. And I can also show you, you know, what to look for, so that if you do go to some open houses, you know, you're going to know what's an issue, what's a concern, and what's not. So that's going to help keep you safe. So how the orientation works is that we're going to go out during the week one day, and it's going to be for about 2 to 3 hours. We're going to either go in the morning or we're going to go in the afternoon. And the reason it's during the week is because I want to show you between 4 and 8 houses that day. And now you're not allowed to buy any of the houses, and they always laugh at that point because they're kind of like, why would you show me houses I can't buy? And it's this weird moment. But you get to explain to them the reason being is that this is for education purposes only. It's so that you can really understand the market before we start looking at homes you might actually want to purchase. So what we're going to do is we're going to go see about 4 to 8 homes depending on how many are available on the market to look at. And so we go during the week and we go during work hours so that we can get through the homes faster. There's less traffic. It's easier to get around, you know, the neighborhoods. There's more parking, all that sort of stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you homes that are at the bottom end of your price point, that are in the middle of your price range, and they're at the top end of your price range. And I'm going to show you some homes that need some updating and are in rougher condition, and I'm going to show you some homes that are pristine and absolutely beautiful and probably brand new. And the reason for that is so that you can get a feel for the different types of homes and the amount of work that might be required if you did decide you wanted to spend less money and have some room for renovations and so on and so forth, right? And then what I do is I say to them, so when are you free next week? Would Monday at 10 a.m. work, 10 to 12 or 10 to 1, or would you prefer, Tuesday from 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 or 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 or whatever that looks like? And they're going to kind of say, oh, well, we weren't really planning on taking some time off work. Could we go on the weekend? And this is where you have to be pretty firm and say, you know what, unfortunately, no, I've tried to do this over the weekend with clients before, and it just doesn't work out. There's way too much traffic. There's way too many people coming in and out of the homes. It's harder to get appointments confirmed because kids are at home and people have stuff going on. It's just much more effective that we do it during the week. I understand that, it's some extra time you have to take off work, but at the end of the day, it's a big part of the buying process, and I want to make sure that you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. So, would that be okay? And they'll say yes, and they will take the time off if they need to. So it'll be up to them if they want to take a morning off or an afternoon off. And then for the orientation tour, you don't go on it until they've been pre-approved. So if the first step is that you're getting them set up with your lender, then you're definitely booking this for like a week or so out so that they get their pre-approval. You get the information, how much can they actually spend, and then you're going to go on the orientation tour with them. If they're already pre-approved and you know the amount, you could book it for within the next couple of days because all we have to do is book appointments and schedule a route, right? It's not very complicated. And at the end of the tour, basically, you're going to recap with them. So again, you could go and grab another coffee. I have occasionally been like, okay, I'll take you out to lunch, or we'll go and grab dinner. Usually don't do dinner. I usually do a lunch, or more often than not, we would stand in the driveway of the final house or sit in the living room, depending on how long our appointment was, and break down the properties and discuss the pros and cons. And what happens by the time you're done your orientation tour is that you have an extremely clear idea of what these buyers want. Do they want the home that needs the work? Do they want the highest do they want to spend the top of their budget and buy the home where they can just move in and everything is done and it's brand new? Or are they floating somewhere in the middle? And so when you then move to the next phase, which is showing them properties and setting them up on your prospect matches or your collab, and I highly recommend collab, guys. So if you aren't on board with that yet, please take a look at it and get on board. It's amazing. But when you set them up on that and they start wanting to book appointments to see properties, or you start seeing the property matches come in daily, you can pick out the ones you know that they're going to like the best and focus on showing them those homes, which is going to get them to an offer a lot faster. So the reason we do all of this at the front end is to make less work for ourselves on the back end. Okay. Now, after I've explained what the orientation tour is and I've set them up and we've got it in our schedule, because I never leave an appointment with a client without having my next one scheduled, ever. So even for showings, if I go and show them houses, I might show them 3 houses on Saturday afternoon. And when we leave, I'm going to say, you know what, that was awesome. Let me know what you think about these homes. I don't think any of them are a fit for you based on, what we've been talking about. But if you decide you want to move ahead with one, that's great. Let me know and we can do that. If not, let's plan to go out again one day next week and look at a couple more houses and see what comes up over the next 48 hours. Do you want to go out Monday or would you prefer Tuesday? Right? So I'm always locking them in for the next step. So once I've organized the orientation tour and I've got that set up, then my final thing is to get them to sign the contract, right? So before we leave, there's one more thing we got to do, and before we go on our orientation tour as well, is just go through the paperwork and get ourselves signed up so that we know that we're working together, and we can move forward with the process. How does that sound to you? There's 1 or 2 forms you've got to sign, and I'm going to go through them and explain everything to you, but is there any reason that you wouldn't want to work with me? Right? It's a simple close. It's easy. If you don't like that, if you feel that that's too aggressive, you can even go the next route and be more passive and just say, so the next step in this process is getting all the paperwork signed so that we can move ahead and continue working together. Did you have any questions before we do that? Very simple, right? It's not aggressive. It's not pushy. It's just, do you have any questions? No? Okay, awesome. Let's go through the paperwork. Because what I'm doing is just assuming they're going to sign. I'm not asking them to sign. I'm just saying, okay, now we sign, right? So it's just a difference in the language that you're using. And by the time you've gone through all of this and you've asked them all those questions and you've gotten clear on what they're looking for and you've explained what the orientation tour is and you've educated them on the market, the odds that they're not going to sign with you at that point are probably pretty slim anyway, right? And then from here, the next step is obviously make sure you have their contact information, make sure you have their phone numbers, their emails, all that sort of stuff. And you're going to send them a follow-up email that night after you get home from the meeting. And we'll go through that in a second. But before we move on, are there any questions about the consultation or what I was talking about or the flow or the process of it that you guys want to go through?
Jen, when you said when you're leaving, before you leave the appointment, make another appointment, what's the other appointment for? I kind of missed that part.
Depends on which meeting it is. So for example, if it's a consultation, then in my case, the next step for me would be the orientation tour, right? Because I do orientation tours. After the orientation tour, the next meeting is our next showings. So I'm just always booking our next showings. I always have them on the books because I want to keep moving them through the process. I want to keep them looking at homes, right? So I might be showing them houses on Tuesday and then, they kind of go, yeah, none of these are really the home for me. Then I say, okay, no problem. Well, let's keep looking. Let's see what comes up over the next couple of days. And why don't we plan to go out again on Saturday around 11? Does that work for you? Right? And then they're going to say yes or no, whatever. You get them into your schedule and then you watch the market for the next day or two. And then you book the appointments for the homes you're going to show them and you confirm with them that we're going to go see these 4 properties on Saturday at 11. We're going to start here and then we'll move through the rest. And then that way they always know what's coming next as well. So they're going to feel confident that you're taking care of them, that you're on top of it, right? They're not waiting to hear from you or going, man, when is Jen going to get back to me? Or when do you think we can go see houses again? Because they already know. So it eliminates a lot of that questioning of what you are or aren't doing, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions about that stuff, guys? No? Okay, cool. So what I do after this is the next step when I get home later that day or that night or whatever that might look like is that I send them what I call this is what I heard you say email. And this is what my email looks like. It's the same email every time to every client. I just tweak the information. And the reason I send this that night or at the very latest the next morning is because when you send it, they're just like, holy cow, right? They'll just be like, she was paying attention. All of this is accurate. Yep, she didn't miss anything. And I'm taking the time to reach out and confirm that I heard what they were telling me. And I'm acknowledging that I heard what their needs were. So if you take a look at it, this is the subject. This is what I heard you say. And then it just says, hello, whoever. It was a pleasure to meet with you today or this evening. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. Regarding our meeting, I'll be putting together a prospect match. So now obviously that's going to say collab match to suit your needs in regards to what you're looking for in a home. You'll receive the homes that match your criteria on emails daily. To recap our discussion, this is what I heard you say. The perfect home you would be located in either Bedford Park near the daughter school or in this area near the family home, also known in MLS as this district or this district. The ideal home would be a detached, open to two-story bungalow or backsplit with a private driveway. A nice kitchen would be great. Prefer a backyard that's not near hydro. You are fine with the traditional layout. It's important for you to have space on the main floor for family gatherings. 3 or 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. Be nice to the home and a pool. Perfect price range would be 1.4 to 1.8. Depending on the condition of the house, perfect condition date would be between now and the next 6 months. The next step is to send you listings that match your criteria and set up your email. I'll follow up with this and that and so on. So usually this would say the next step is to go on our orientation tour, but I have it down here further. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 2nd for your buyer orientation. We'll preview a few homes in different areas and get an idea what's on the market, so on and so forth. So all this email is just a really thorough recap of the conversation you had. But what happens when you send this email is the clients read it and they reply to it and they're like, holy cow, this is amazing. Thank you so much. This is exactly what we're looking for. Can't wait to see you on Thursday. And it just continues to build your relationship. Or alternatively, they'll get back and say, you know what, I thought about that a little more and actually I really don't want to spend more than 1.6. Can we edit that? And you know, I would be open to being closer to hydro wires if it was the perfect home. They'll give you edits because what happens when they leave is they still talk, right? Either if it's a single person, they think about what you guys discussed. And if it's a couple, they talk about it in the car on the way home and they might make some changes based on the conversations you had. And this is an opportunity for them to let you know that up front, which allows you to then change your prospect searches or your collab matches and stuff as well and make sure that they're on track. But beyond all of that, this is just impressive because nobody else does this at all. No other agents really do this, that send this recap and say, this is what I heard you say, and are grateful and say, hey, thanks for meeting with me today, right? So it's a very simple one, and you can literally just take this, copy it, paste it, and then just edit the information into an email. This would take you like maybe 5 minutes to send, but to them, it's impressive, right? And it's long and detailed because you want them to know that you were listening and that you heard what they wanted and you heard what they had to say. And that's a very powerful position to be in as well. So that's the next step after the consultation, is to send that letter. And then from there, we just move on to the orientation tour. And basically, the orientation tour, like I mentioned, is just showing them the homes and giving them an idea of what their money can buy them, engaging, you know, are their money and their expectations in alignment, and also if they are in alignment, then, you know, what's their preference? Are they leaning more to the high end or the low end of their budget, or what does that look like? So it just helps us streamline. And you can also, there's some stuff in here. For example, this home tour checklist, you could give them this as part of their visit so that they can make comments on each property and remember the information or the notes. And then, you know, this is another example. If they want to do comparisons, you can do side-by-sides, house 1, house 2, house 3. This next one is just a letter that you can send during the process. So again, this is more system stuff that you could say, you know, hey, how are we doing, right? I know at our initial meeting, we made several commitments to you. How am I doing right now? Am I exceeding your expectations? Is there anything that I'm not doing that you feel that I could be doing? I want to make sure that I stick to my commitments. That's a letter that you could tweak and send as part of your system if you wanted to. And this is a buyer guarantee. So this is the buyer guarantee that I use. So when I get my buyer rep signed and my working with a realtor and all of this, I also give them this. And it guarantees them what it is they're going to get from me. And it guarantees them that we can exit the contract at any point in time, which makes a lot of buyers feel more comfortable. And it also guarantees them they'll see every listing that matches their criteria. And I will do my best to get them any inside information I can on the properties from the other agents. And then at the bottom, we all sign it. So you'll notice there's buyer and there's agent, right? And that can be part of their buyer contract as well. If you wanted to include something like that, you don't have to. But those are all part of working with buyers, all of those systems. And it's up to you what you choose that to be, right? And then from here, guys, the next step going forward at this point is just showing them houses, right? So booking appointments for the homes that you feel are a fit. And I would arguably say that you should be choosing a lot of the homes that they're seeing. So a lot of agents make the mistake of just setting them up on Collab or on Prospect Search and waiting for the buyer to reach out to them and say, hey, I want to go see this house. If you're doing that, you're not doing this right. That is your job, right? I know that they have access to all of the systems and Realtor.ca and House Sigma and all that sort of stuff. Sure. But at the end of the day, they've hired you to help them with that, and they're working, they're busy, they've got other commitments as well. So, you know, on your daily schedule that we create, one of the things I have in there is your morning activity is reviewing all of the listing matches and emails, and then reaching out to your clients if you see something that you think might be a fit. And you should be doing that every single day. So when you have an active buyer, you should be checking your collab matches or your prospect matches at least at the bare minimum daily, and reaching out to your clients, whether it's by text or whether it's by email or by phone, depends on how they like to communicate, right? And saying to them, hey, did you see the house at 123 Main Street? This looks like it's right up your alley based on what we talked about. Why don't we plan to go see it tomorrow night around 3 o'clock? I'll look at some other properties and, you know, maybe we can see 3 or 4 at the same time. Are there any in particular you had your eye on, right? So you're including them in the process, but you're actually leading the charge here. You're taking responsibility. You're kind of dragging them through the process a little bit. And they're grateful for that. So don't think that they're not. A lot of agents make that mistake and they just kind of wait around, and then their conversion time from getting a client to closing a client is way longer because they're not taking any initiative. It doesn't mean you're being bossy. It doesn't mean you're being aggressive, because all they'll say is, you know what, yeah, we saw that, but we don't like the street, or we don't like that it doesn't have a pool, or whatever that might be. But you know what? We are free Tuesday. Why don't we plan to go see a couple more? Let us know which ones you like, and we'll take a look as well. I've had that conversation many, many times. And at the end of the day, the end goal is still just to get them out viewing homes, right? So at least it allows me to do that. And that's your job at this point, is just to continue to show them properties until they find the home that's the right home for them. And then at the next step, then we get into the offer process, right? Putting together the paperwork, and making sure that we have all the contracts that we need, and reaching out to the listing agents. So one of the things that a lot of buyers don't do, or a lot of buyer agents forget to do at the beginning, especially when they have offers, is reach out to the listing agent, and make sure that they have all the information they need on the property before they put an offer together. If you're just drafting an offer and you haven't spoken to the listing agent and you haven't asked them the right questions, and then you're just sending the offer over to that agent and the agent's not even aware you're preparing it, then you're doing that wrong as well. You should absolutely be reaching out to that listing agent prior to even starting to prepare an offer, okay? So there's a couple of different things we need to take a look at here. The first one being under office and deal paperwork. When we go under office and deal paperwork, you're gonna see there's 2 checklists, okay? There's copy of deal and listing paperwork, and then there's the buyer template kit for building your kits in web forms or Authentisign. if you look at the deal and listing paperwork, I've actually gone through and broken down and listed what paperwork is required for every type of listing or every type of deal submission, okay? Obviously, this has to get updated with the COVID information because that's changed a little bit. But if you scroll through, you can just find the type of transaction you're working on and you can find your checklist, right? So obviously, we're not doing lease listing paperwork. We're not doing commercial paperwork. We're not doing listing paperwork. So we're going to scroll right through to the buyer section. Tenant paperwork, buyer paperwork, right? So when we look at, and this is commercial lease tenant, commercial buyer, and you're going to note that this says keep in your files for now. This is your initial paperwork, fully signed buyer rep, fully signed working with the realtor, fully signed FinTrack. And we could even add to this your buyer guarantee if you want to. If you want. And we obviously also now have to add in our COVID forms, right? So that has to get added on here. But this at least reminds you of what you need. And then if you keep scrolling down, accepted offer paperwork, right, for all buyer and tenant deals. Now, obviously, this again has to change. The email is the wrong address, but I will fix that later. But here's everything that you need to provide when you're submitting a deal to the office. And again, this is also going to be a good checklist of everything you need when you're preparing an offer. So for example, copy of deposit receipt. Well, that comes after a deal is accepted. MLS listing, same thing. Receipt of funds form, same thing. But when you're preparing an offer, you need a confirmation of cooperation, an agreement of purchase and sale, an 801, a Schedule B, in our case now also a Schedule C, right? Because we have that new Schedule C. Sorry, I'll fix that later. I know that typing is messy. And then those are our offer of paperwork, right? So you can figure this out just by reading through it and going, okay, what do I already have done? What am I missing? What do I need? And what do I not need until I have an accepted offer? So it's just a simple checklist for you, but it's for every type of offer. So you're also going to notice that one of them is going to say buyer tenant deals. One of them is going to say freehold and lease. And then there's going to be condo paperwork as well, because you have to make sure if you're doing a condo deal that you're doing the paperwork on the right paperwork, right? And then if we read down here, additional deal paperwork, you know, fully assigned acknowledgement, copy, notice of fulfillments, amendments, waivers, mutual release if necessary, cancellation form if necessary. These are all things that you need to complete, but this is a great checklist for you to utilize. And remember, hey, here's what I actually need in order to do buyer deals, right? You can find every single one of these forms in AuthentiSign. So you don't have to go looking for them other than our office paperwork forms. So for example, the COVID forms, right? We don't have those in AuthentiSign at this point. Our Schedule C, our Schedule B, and then we have some other forms as well on the listing side, like the open house form and things like that. Those can be found either through the office, through web forms, or through the Gary McGowan's folder where he has everything posted, which is gmrealty.ca/forms. If you go to this URL, you'll be taken into a shared Google Drive form and you'll get all your COVID forms here. So you can access them this way as well, okay? So I'm just letting this load up. So you're going to see all of the different COVIDs plus our new Schedule B plus our new Schedule C. And then we also did have a folder that had the office forms as well, but I don't know if they got erased or what happened, but I will look into that for you. And then I will also be uploading all of those forms into our resources folder as well underneath, underneath office and deal paperwork. So going forward, that will be here for you so you can access it, okay? So once you have your checklist and you have all of your paperwork and you've reached out to the listing agent and you've had your conversation with them, and if you go under scripts and then you go under, oh, hang on one sec. Can Gary's folders with those docs be added to the resource folder as well? Yeah, actually, I don't see why not, Irene. I can certainly share it, or I'll just upload those forms, either or. But yeah, I'll make sure that all of the forms, including the COVID forms, are in the resources doc for you guys. Definitely. If you go, oh, hold on. Yeah, I agree. Easier to have in one spot for sure. Offers, if you go under PSN coaching scripts, guys, which are my scripts that I've written and drafted over the years, and you go under offer scripts, you're going to see call to listing agent scripts regarding offers. So this is that call. This is going to guide you through what to say to that agent, what questions to ask. So, you know, hey, hey, Irene, it's Jennifer Keller-Williams. I showed your listing to my client the other day, and they're quite interested in the property. They have a few questions for you before they make a final decision. Do you have a second to chat? And the reason I phrase it that way is because I don't want to necessarily say yet if I'm not 100% sure that they're going to put in an offer. I'm usually 99% sure by the time I make this call, but just in case. And then of course the agent's going to go, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to say that's great. First question is just wondering, you have any other offers currently registered on the property? You always want to ask this question, guys. We need to know, am I going into competition? And a lot of agents might not answer that question. They might say, no, we don't have anything currently registered, but we've got 3 or 4 other agents asking the same questions. So at least that you know that there's other interest in the property. And sometimes they say, no, nothing at this time, and that's all you'll get. I'm going to say, okay, awesome. And have you had any previous offers on the property? And, you know, we ask that question because I want to know if they did or not. And if they say yes, then I say, okay, do you mind me asking how come the deal didn't come together? And to be honest with you, you might think that's a weird question to ask, but they're most likely going to tell you. Depends on the agent. But a lot of agents will fully say, oh, you know, the buyers couldn't get qualified. We couldn't come to terms on a price. They had a home inspection. We really don't want a home inspection. You'd be surprised the amount of information you get by asking these kinds of questions. Oh,
Sorry,
yeah, go
uh,
ahead.
is a listing agent obligated to tell you if there was previous offers or not, or if there are offers?
Yeah, if there are offers, not if there were previous. They're not technically obligated, but they can't lie about it either, right? Ethically. Um, so they're not expecting you to ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah. If they don't really give you an answer or they're short on your questions, then you can say, no problem, I completely understand. Are there a lot of agents calling and asking questions like I am, right? So that's if you're not really getting anywhere with these couple questions. That doesn't usually happen, but sometimes it does. And then you can say, fantastic, thank you. And is there a specific closing date your client's looking for? The reason I ask this question here is because it's a lob question. These questions here are a little bit more upfront and a little harder topics and maybe making the agent a bit uncomfortable. So then you throw a lob at them to just go, hey, you know, is there a specific closing date your client's looking for? And they might have one, they might not, but you know, we need to know that in order to prepare our offer anyway. So we might as well ask, right? And then follow that up with any other specific questions you or your clients actually have pertaining to the property. So you probably do have some questions that you need to ask, right? Maybe it's about the lot, maybe it's about the pool, maybe it's about the age of the furnace, the age of the roof, whatever that looks like. So that's what this section here is. And then when they're done telling you the answers, you're going to say, you know, thank you so much for that information. I really appreciate it. And, you know, is your client available tonight to review my offer if we decide to move forward? And hopefully they say yes. They might say, you know what, no, we need till tomorrow, but at least that gives you an indicator of the seller's availability. And then you're going to say, that's perfect. I think that's it for now. I'll register with your office once my guys have made a final decision, assuming they want to move forward with this. And, you know, thanks so much. You can also ask before you get off the phone, is there anything else I need to know about the property? You could ask questions like, has there been a death in the property, anything like that. They're not obligated to disclose that either, again, unless directly asked. So it's up to us as buyer agents to do our due diligence here, right? So ask as many questions as you can think of. But these questions should always get asked before you even start preparing an offer. And the reason for that being is that if they do have other offers on the property, you need to know that, right? You need to know if you're going into competition. They might be in sign back on an offer. And what that means is that they can't even look at your offer until that sign back period is over. And if that's the case, then there's no point in you drafting an offer right now. So you might as well just wait, right? So a lot of this allows us to kind of gauge, hey, what do I need to do next? Am I preparing the offer? Are we waiting? Do I have to have a conversation with my client? What does this look like? What's my next step, right? In multiple offer situations, are we still allowed to ask listing brokerages to provide a list of competing brokerage salesperson upon acceptance of our offer to protect ourselves? Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. You can ask for copies of the 801s from all of the offers that were submitted that day. If you feel that there's a question about the integrity or whether that was actually a thing. Yeah, definitely. Now, some brokerages, you have to get your broker of record to request it from their broker of record. Depends on how they structure it, but you can definitely get that information for sure. Okay. Once you've completed your call to the listing agent and you have all the information and you call your clients back and you review all of the data and you kind of say, hey, here's the questions to the answers you had, and then your clients think it over and decide, yeah, we want to go ahead and create an offer, then the next step in the process is going into Authentisign and drafting your offer based on the forms that are required, right? So we talk about, having your templates and your kits set up in Authentisign so that it makes it faster and easier for you to go through that process. And I know in our class, I believe it was last week, it might have been the week before, I can't remember, we went through those templates and what forms were required and how to add them into Authentisign and how to draft your documents in Authentisign and all that sort of stuff. So you should be pretty comfortable with those forms. I'm going to log in Authentisign really quickly and we can just do a quick review of them, but just make sure that you're doing this in advance of actually having to prepare offers, right? You guys have all heard me say this at least once, most likely, and you'll hear me say it a million times. Do not practice on your clients, right? Please don't. Learn how to do this stuff in advance of having to actually do an offer for multiple reasons. One, because you're going to feel more confident with your client when you get to the point where you have to prepare an offer because you're going to know what to do. Two, it's going to take you way less time to get the paperwork done, which is going to make you feel way more comfortable with the process. And three, it eliminates a huge amount of stress that you're going to feel if you wait till the last minute and then go, okay, I got to do this offer. I'm trying to get it to them tonight. My clients need it before 4 o'clock because they're not available to sign it after that. And I've got to get it to the listing agent as well. And I don't know how to do this. Okay. That is not a position you want to be in, but it's one a lot of agents create for themselves very, very regularly. So try to avoid that. And what I say to everybody, guys, is grab a listing every week and practice doing an offer on that listing. You guys can send me listings and offers as often as you want. Send me the paperwork. I'll review it. I'll double check it. I'll make sure. I'll give you my feedback. I'll even sign it as a buyer client. I don't care. That's what I'm here for. But you need to actually commit and do it. You got to be the one to take responsibility for that, right? You have to learn your skills. So let's say we come into Authentisign and we're going, okay, I have an offer and my clients want to put an offer in this property. You can go into Stratus and go to search properties and find the property that your clients want you to put the offer in on. Put in the address or put in the MLS number or whatever. And then at the top, and I'm just going to show you this real quick because this is a whole other class, so don't want to dig too deep into it. But let's say, we've looked at these listings in Aurora. There's 3 new ones. It's better than yesterday, so that's good. One sec. Yeah, and let's say that this house here on Crane Street, this is the one my clients want to buy. So I'm going to open up this MLS listing. Here's the house. Here's all the information I need on the property, the details, the chattels and fixtures, the attachments across the top, the Schedule B for the listing brokerage, all that sort of stuff, right? What I can do here is see this Instinet Authentisign. If I click on that, it'll actually take me right into Instinet Authentisign and into the transactions part where I can start preparing my paperwork, okay? And what I want to do from here is as it starts, I'm going to select my template because I've already pre-built my template. So I'm going to say, I want to do a buyer freehold package. And here's my information. Here's my MLS number on the property. And here I'm the cooperating salesperson. So I'm going to hit create. And when I hit create, all of my forms and all of my documents that I need to complete are going to be in this kit. Now, If you've already done a BRA and you've already done a working with a realtor and that sort of stuff for these clients, you might already have a kit that you've started. So you might not do it this way. You might just go into the kit that you've already created. And then on the right-hand side over here, you can go to forms and just select the forms that you need to fill out and start filling them out. So for example, offer summary, confirmation of cooperation agreement, a purchase and sale, right? But if you haven't done that yet, or you haven't got a BRA or anything signed, then this is a really fast way to do it. And then all of your forms are just loaded here, and you can just go through and click on them one at a time and start filling them out. So for example, buyer representation agreement, if I click on this, it's going to load the form, and then I can start to fill out all of the fields in the form. And it'll have some of my information preloaded as well. So my commencement date, my area, my price, my commission rate, all that sort of stuff, right? And we're not going to go through all of the documents today because again, that's a whole other class. But basically what you would do is come into AuthentiSign, create the transaction kit, make sure you have all of the forms that you need, fill out all of the forms. At that point, before you send anything to your client, guys, those forms should be getting sent to me so that I can check them, make sure that you didn't make any mistakes, make sure that everything is good to go, give you the thumbs up, and then you can send it to your client to get it signed. So with that in mind, here's what I'm going to say. First step is prepare the paperwork, but please let me know in advance that you're doing it, because that way, if you tell me, you know, on Sunday, hey, I'm probably going to be doing an offer Monday, or you tell me Monday morning, hey, I'm going to be working on an offer this afternoon, I know and I'm expecting it. So I'll be, when it comes in, I'll know to get to it right away and I'll be watching for it. If I just get a random email from you at 6 o'clock at night and I didn't know that you were doing an offer, it might take me longer to review it and get back to you, right? So for the sake of expediency, and regardless, I do try to make sure that I'm fast with it and I get back to you guys quickly no matter what. But if I don't know it's coming in, I might not check my phone quite as often, right? So you got to give me a bit of a heads up on that. What I'll do is one of two things. I can log into your AuthentiSign and I can take a look at the forms in there, or you can electronically send me the forms as a remote viewer and I will view them and then approve them, and then you'll be able to send them to your client. If you do need to make changes, I will let you know what those changes are, and then you can go in and edit them, and then you can send them to your client. So regardless though, please don't send them to me after you've already sent them to your client, because I can't help you at that point. It's already signed, and then you're going to have to go back and fix it, and it's going to look unprofessional. So do yourself a favor and make sure you do that in advance as well. And then the next step, once you have your offer signed and everything is all good to go, is the negotiation, right? So when you're figuring out, for example, what to offer on the home, you need to do a CMA, right? So you can't just go, okay, they're asking 1.488, I'm going to give them 1.4 and see what happens. What's this home worth? Have you done your research? Have you done your homework? Can you advise your client what to spend and what to pay for this property? The only way to do that is by doing a market analysis, a CMA, right? Again, whole other class. We're not going to get into that today, but that's something that you should be practicing and working on as well. So weekly, you should also be giving yourself the challenge of doing a CMA so that you are good at pricing and you are able to advise your client on what this home is actually worth. Because people can ask whatever they want for a property. Doesn't mean that's the value of it, right? What are the most recent sales? What were people willing to pay for homes in similar condition, in the same location, similar age, similar square footage, so on and so forth, right? So as part of your offer process, you need to be completing a CMA and you need to be completing all of your paperwork. And only when you've done a CMA are you going to be able to advise your clients at all in any kind of regard to what that price might be. Two things you shouldn't do. Give them the option to just pick a price because they could be way off and your offer's not going to go anywhere and you're going to make it harder for yourself. And the other thing is tell them exactly what to offer. We can't do that either. But what we can do is give them all the information that they need in order to make an educated decision. Irene, yeah, absolutely. I've done a couple over the last little bit, but we can definitely do another CMA class. It's kind of going to be coming up in the next few weeks. But yes, for sure. So once you have your CMA done, once you have your offer done, then you get your offer signed by your clients. You send it over to the listing agent. You call the listing brokerage. You register your offer. Make sure that it's in their system that you've submitted an offer. Some brokerages will ask you for an 801. Some brokerages won't, depends on their process. So just follow that protocol. You have to have one signed either way, but you might have to email it to their admin. You might not, depends. And then it goes to the listing agent, and the listing agent is going to take it to their client, and they're going to then present your offer, and you're most likely going to get a counter offer back. And that this goes into, again, another topic, which is, offer negotiations and how to handle that and what that process looks like, which is also one of our classes. So we will be covering that as well. And then you go through the process until you either come to terms and you get an accepted offer, or your offer dies, right? You don't get to terms and you move on to a new property. It's one of the two. It doesn't usually go any other direction. If you do get an accepted offer, then you move into the conditional period of your process. So if you had conditions in your offer, such as a home inspection or financing, the minute you have an accepted offer, the buyers get a copy of the offer, the lawyer gets a copy of the offer, the lender gets a copy of the offer, and you're sending it to everybody. And that's in order to make sure that the process of the conditions get expedited as quickly as possible, and you can move through. And then it's the matter of booking the home inspection, scheduling all of that sort of stuff, making sure the lenders have what they need in order to get the confirmation for the mortgage commitment, and then firming up the deal, right? If everything goes okay with the offer or with the home inspection and the financing, great. You do a notice of fulfillment and you remove those conditions. If there's issues, then we have to go back and renegotiate and do an amendment, right? And once we get all of that done, and that's usually about a week to 10-day period of negotiations where we do all of those activities. Once we get through that, we remove all of our conditions or we sign our amendments, and one of two things happens. The deal gets accepted and firms up, or the deal dies and we do a mutual release and we walk away from it. Couple of things to note that you should be advising your buyer clients up front is that when they do put in an offer on a property, they're going to need to have a deposit check within 24 hours of the offer being accepted. And depending on where they buy, that could be 5% of the purchase price. It could be 2% of the purchase price. When you get to kind of Bradford and Barrie and, Cobourg and East, West, North, you can put less down for sure. But if you're in Newmarket, Aurora, the GTA in general, it's probably 4 to 5%. Okay. So you got to make sure that they're prepared and they have access to that money. If they're pulling it from a GIC or an RSP or something, they need to make sure they do that at the beginning of the process, so the funds are out of those accounts and accessible to them before the offer date, okay, or before the offer gets accepted, because legally that deposit has to be at the listing brokerage within 24 hours of acceptance of an offer. All right.
Yeah.
And yeah.
For example, with this listing that you have up,
Yep.
the attachment says schedule. So when you press instant and authentic sign, are those schedules automatically uploaded into that?
No, I don't believe so. We can check. Let's try it. But my understanding is we'd have to open it and download it and then upload it into the transaction kit under documents.
Can you just explain quickly what those schedules might be?
Yeah, it's usually, so for example, this one is their brokerage schedule B, right? So this has additional clauses like standard, their Royal LePage clauses. A Schedule B outlines what happens with the deposit amount. So does the listing brokerage have a deposit, a trust account? What's the interest rate on the trust account? At what point will your clients get interest on that money that was put in? Do they have an administration fee? And then it'll also have standard clauses that are brokerage wide for that brokerage. So, the parties agreement, they acknowledge that the real estate brokerage in this agreement has recommended independent professional advice prior to signing documents, blanket clauses, right? What you do need to make sure, though, is that whenever there is a Schedule B of any sort, you have to make sure you read it, because it can't contradict your Schedule A. So if you have a condition, for example, this one comes up a lot. Unless otherwise stated in this agreement, the chattels which are included in the purchase price are being sold in as-is condition. So if you just list the chattels and warrant and the chattels and fixtures under the chattels section, but you don't have a clause in your Schedule A saying the chattels and fixtures will be in good working order, then this automatically means that they will just be as is, which means even if you close on it and then the stove doesn't work, that your buyers, it's on your buyer. It's not on the sellers or the listing brokerage. So you have to make sure you read and review all of the clauses, and then everything. You'll notice over time that they're all very similar. But it is good to keep it in mind. And then sometimes it might be a Schedule C, which would be an like something to do with advertising. Or it might be a survey of the property that's being attached as an additional schedule, or it could be a list of chattels and fixtures. Sometimes it's a Schedule A with the full legal description on it, but those are usually, for example, with our brokerage now, we have a Schedule C that's a COVID Schedule C, right? So that's new. Things like that. They would be like additional addendums to the agreement of purchase and sale.
So from what you were saying about like the chattels and warranty or as is, so if we were to have a clause saying that they should be in good working condition, but their Schedule B says it's sold as is, which one precedes the other? Like, does the listing agent precede the clause that we put, or?
So the clause in their Schedule B said, if not stated anywhere else, right? So what that means is if we have a clause in our Schedule A that says the chattels and fixtures have to be in good working order, our clause will supersede their Schedule B clause because the Schedule B clause states if not listed anywhere else in the agreement, right? Sometimes we do have to go in and remove clauses from the Schedule B if they are contradictory to clauses we have in the Schedule A. Absolutely.
But when we're making an offer, we would be the one to remove it from Schedule B?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So as the buyer agent, we would review the Schedule B, and you can always check with me and see what I think, or if it's something that makes sense or doesn't make sense, or check with the broker hotline or Christine Tones. But if there was a clause in there that you weren't comfortable with, or you felt overstepped or contradicted a clause in your Schedule A, then it's your responsibility to remove that from the Schedule B and have your clients initial it as part of your initial offer.
I see. A little off topic, but would we have a class in the future about clauses and whatnot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, when you click, and going back to your first question, when you click the link at the top of Instinet AuthentiSign, it doesn't upload those additional documents automatically. So we would have to open the listing and then download that document and upload it into the transaction kit. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a lot of information to go through at once, right? So we do have a class on CMAs, and we have a class on offer negotiations, and we have a class on how to actually properly fill out paperwork. And we have a class on AuthentiSign and how to use that system and do your templates and all that sort of stuff. And then we also have a class on clauses and understanding paperwork, right? So all of that stuff, as we go week by week, we will cover. And then because I'm recording them all as well, as we do them, they'll be uploaded onto the YouTube channel. So you'll have access to them. Like today's class will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So you can re-watch it. So if there was a script I said, or you can't remember where in resources I showed you something, you can go back and review it and get all that information.
Would you be like providing like maybe like a schedule saying, oh, this day like say this Wednesday we're gonna have this class, or?
So I do have one, and we were following it previously, but with the whole COVID and work from home and all that sort of stuff, it got a little bit out of whack. So that's why I haven't got one currently. I have to kind of sit down and do it, like outline the actual schedule, but it's a repetitive schedule, right? So it's the same. There's about 12 or 13 classes, and then they reset. So, by the time you go through them all once, you'll be able to then attend them again, either just reviewing them online or by coming to the classes as you choose to. Yeah.
Is that schedule that you're talking about in the resources, or is that something?
It was, but because we got between going, so what happened was when we started going paperless in March, all of our, I don't know if you were here yet for this, but some of you guys will remember, all of our coaching classes got bumped, right? Our whole schedule got thrown out of whack. Because all of the training got replaced by command paperless training. And then within a couple of weeks of that, all of the COVID stuff happened. So basically what I've been doing to try and make sure everyone's getting the information they need is trying to cover the topics right now that I know people need the most. So I'm not currently following a set schedule because we lost basically a month and a half of our schedule, if that makes sense. So I'm just
If
trying to catch up so people get the information they need, and then we'll reset the schedule.
if like one of us hasn't attended the command paperless training, how would we go? Is it on YouTube or anything?
Yeah, on our YouTube channel, there's a video on how to do it. And if I'm not mistaken, there's actually going to be a class, a webinar through the office on it next week as well. I just don't think they've locked down which day yet. But that's coming up next week, yeah. Yeah, because there's a few people in the same boat that didn't get access to it or had planned to, and then the classes got canceled or whatever, right? So yeah, so all of the training will get covered, and you'll get access to all the classes, and you'll know when they are. Right now, like I said, the topics are all out of whack because our schedule just got so messed up, right? And I'm just trying to right now make sure we're covering what everyone needs before I get back into a set schedule, because I don't want to teach a topic that, like, for example, open houses, that's not relevant to anybody right now, right? Obviously, we'll need to teach it and we will do it, but that's going to get bumped to the end of the list. Now, doing virtual open houses and that sort of stuff, that might happen sooner, right? So I'm just gauging what's going on and what the needs are, and then basing it on that at this particular moment in time. But I can tell you that next week's class is going to be working with sellers. So we did working with buyers this week. Next Wednesday, it's going to be working with sellers.
Okay. Now, as far as like making an offer, like let's say we had a multiple offer or any type of offer, how would we go by actually pricing it properly? Like I know doing a yeah, but like when we're in a multiple offer and we don't know what the offers are,
Right.
how do we go by knowing what to actually price it at?
Well, are you pricing it or are you putting an offer in on it? You mean if you're a buyer in a multiple offer situation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your CMA would be the starting point for that. You'd know what the market value is, and then you have to gauge how many other offers are there. And then you have to look at what your buyers are willing to pay for the property. There's no way to know that answer. It's gut and it's instinct, and it's budget. What are your buyers willing to spend, and how much should they spend, right? When we do a CMA, we usually have a range, right? We don't have an exact, like a CMA isn't going to say your house is worth $673,000. It's going to say, you know, you're worth between 600 and 630, 640, give or take, depending on how you compare to the homes in the same range as you. Are you better? Are you similar? Are you the worst of the best, right? So you're going to gauge it on that first and foremost. So we might know that, for example, that Crane Street listing that that we were using as an example, it was listed at 1.488. Well, if I do my CMA and I know that the most recent sale that's the best comparable is 1.375, then I know that they're super overpriced. So two things is going to happen. One, I'm probably not going to go into multiples on it. And two, if I am, I'm still going to keep my client protected and advise them on what they really should and shouldn't pay for the home. So if I know the most recent sale was 375, but we're low on inventory and there's other buyers lining up to buy the property, you know, they might be willing to pay 1.4, 1.410, but they really shouldn't pay any more than that for multiple reasons. One, it's not going to appraise properly, most likely, and that's going to put your client in a bad position or potentially kill the deal. And two, it's not worth overpaying, right? There are other opportunities in a market where you can find a home that they don't have to overpay for. So you have to be able to learn and read the market and have those conversations with people.
What do you mean by it won't appraise properly? So if a house is overly, like say somebody overpays for a property,
yeah,
and it's not appraised at that price, the deal can fall through?
Yeah, for sure. So, and if the buyers firmed up their financing, the buyer's responsible for the difference. So what I mean by that is when people buy houses, the bank 90% of the time sends an appraiser to the home to walk through and say, you know, yeah, the home is worth 1.38 or 1.39 or whatever that number is, right? If your clients paid 1.45 for the house and the bank comes back and says, well, it's worth 1.38 and we'll lend to you at the 1.38, but we're not giving you any more than that, your buyer is responsible for the difference between 1.38 and 1.45.
Even if they were approved before for more?
Yeah, because the bank isn't going to lend it if the house isn't worth it. Yeah, so that's the thing. It doesn't always matter. If your client could be approved for like $1 million, $2 million, But if the house doesn't appraise at the price you offered to pay for it, the bank's not going to just give them that money. They're going to say, no, your house didn't appraise at that. We'll give you 1.38. You're responsible for the difference. And if you can't come up with it, then you don't get financing. And so a lot, like some deals have fallen apart because of that. Now, ideally, this is why we have a financing condition period, and the appraisal gets done within that window, so that if there is an issue, your client has a way to walk away from the deal, right? However, sometimes banks don't do the appraisal till closer to the closing date. And if the deal is already firm and then that happens, then your buyer's in a tough position if they don't have liquid assets to cover that difference, right? So this is why we need to know that we're making sure our clients are putting in an offer that's a reasonable offer on a property, regardless of how many other offers there are. So I can't tell you the amount of times my clients were approved for more money, but we chose not to put in any more on the table because we were concerned it wouldn't appraise. And we didn't have enough to cover a significant difference, right?
So when an appraiser appraises a property, do they appraise it based on what's sold in the past, like a CMA, or how did?
Yeah, basically they don't have access to all the same data we do. So it depends on the appraiser that you get. It depends on their perception and their view of the property, but they're essentially doing what we're doing, but they're doing replacement cost value as well, right? So we do a CMA purely based on market. They do a CMA based on replacement costs of particular items. Like, so for example, you know, if you have a pool in one property and no pool in the other, if the valuation of a pool is 30,000, they might adjust your price by 30,000, even though we know that that value to a buyer might not be 30,000, maybe it's 5 or 10,000, right? But they're not looking at it that way. They're looking at actual valued replacement costs. So appraisals tend to trend slightly lower than what market value would, but banks have scales, right? They're if it's like a couple of thousand off, they're not gonna really blink an eye. But if you're off by 50 or 60 or 100,000, they're certainly not going to give you that lending.
So like what was happening, like I know, okay, this might be a little off topic, but back in like 2017 when the market was like really high and people had like huge multiple offers and like it was going way higher than value, what was happening with the appraisers then?
Same thing. The difference was that a lot of the money, a lot of the offers were cash offers, or they were coming in where people had, you know, they were offering $2 million on a house that maybe was worth 1.3, 1.4 realistically from a lending point of view. But if they were putting 800, 900 cash down, it didn't matter because they only needed the 1.3, 1.4 for the lending.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Right? So that was a big part of why the overseas money was such a big factor in that market, because there was just so much of it. So there was an abundance of money being invested into the market, cash, not lending.
I see. Okay.
Right. So to go back to answering your initial question, when we're doing a CMA, you have to make sure that we're guiding our clients and keeping them safe. So, you know, we have to know what their maximum is that they're comfortable paying for a home, and what's the maximum that we feel comfortable with in regard to that home. Now, is it going to be a bit over what the last person paid? Yeah. And we know the banks will allow for that to an extent, so that's fine. But we're not going over by 100,000 or 200,000 unless they have the cash to cover that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you're in multiples, there's no way to answer that question. It depends on your client, it depends on their cash, it depends on the budget, it depends on the property, it depends on how many offers, depends on the market that we're in. It's all variable. So a lot of these questions, they're just experience questions that it's going to take time to learn this stuff, and you'll learn it by doing deals.
So what kind of like question would you ask the listing agent to kind of have an idea on where the offers sit? Is there a specific type of questions you would ask a listing agent?
Yeah, it depends on the agent though, what sort of answers you'll get, right? So for example, a very common question that gets asked all the time is, you know, you go in, you submit your first offer, you do the first round kind of thing, and then the agent might call you back and say, hey, we're giving everyone the chance to improve their offer. And then you might ask a question like, you know, how am I doing? Am I sitting near the top of the pack? Am I in the middle? You know, do I need to firm up my deal? Do I need to clean up my offer? And that's all like realtor language. So cleaning up your offer means taking conditions out, right? Which is basically saying, do you have a firm offer on the table? And you can blatantly ask that question if you want, but you know, most some agents will answer it, some agents won't, depends on the agent. They're not supposed to disclose what's in another offer, obviously, so they shouldn't be answering that, but a lot of agents do, right? They'll say, yeah, we do have a couple of firm offers, because they're not specifically saying any details other than, hey, there's no conditions in it. Where do we fall in the pack is kind of like, am I near the top? Am I in the middle? Am I at the bottom? Because you're trying to gauge, do I need to make a big jump here on price? Or am I in a competitive position? And again, the agent may or may not answer that question, right? You could ask, like I've had agents straight up say to me, what number do I need to write down? We can't answer that, obviously. I've had agents say just some crazy stuff and ask really blatant questions. Don't be that agent. Don't put the listing agent in that position, but you can dig a little, right? Ask without asking, basically. You're kind of just changing your language a little bit. What do we need to do to be more competitive is another question you can ask. At the end of the day, though, it truly comes down to what can your clients actually do? What's realistic for them? And then you're either the best or you're not the best. Simple as, right?
Fair enough, yep.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, guys?
This is maybe like way back before we even put in an offer, like more about lead generation. And like right now, you can't really lead gen in person, door knocking, most of the stuff, but like about getting that buyer or doing like getting online buyers. Remember how you were saying like most buyers usually go online first.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a class maybe talking about how to lead gen online?
Yeah, we have a full lead generation class. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we pretty much cover everything in our classes. It's just a matter of what order we get to them in and the timing of when you come into the program, what you're going to get first, right? But yeah, we cover like real estate from start to finish in our classes. So, any other questions, guys?
Jen, did you update necessary documents on our Google share folder?
I am working on that. So that came up at some point in the session. I'm going to be uploading the COVID forms as well as the Schedule B, Schedule C, all that stuff into our Google Drive folder as well. Yeah.
And you are creating as a package, or it will be just separate documents and we have to put them together ourselves?
So they'll just be, it'll be in a folder, but it'll be separate documents because depending on the scenario, you might need some more than others, right? So if I create packages, that doesn't really make sense because then you'd have to separate them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, guys, I'll let you go. Have a great weekend and we'll all talk on Tuesday, okay?
Okay, see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome. Bye.